Hey now, today's Monday, May the 11th, and we're going to finish up today with our discussion of film throughout the decades. We just got done with the 1970s. We'll hit the 80s, 90s, and the aughts, the thousands. Um, and then the rest of this week, we're going to kind of stagger things. Before I start with film genres, you guys are going to have an assignment with movie soundtracks. It'll be kind of fun. I'll give a short introduction to it, and then you'll have a worksheet where you'll answer some questions about movie soundtracks, and then we'll do film genres. And you guys will have a short assignment where you talk about your favorite movie genres of all time and why. And then that'll pretty much wrap us up, probably for the year, which is sad to say, but yeah, that's where we're at. So, good day, my beautiful children. Today we're talking about the 1980s and on in the film industry. So, this is a decade I remember vividly. This is, kind of when I really started going to movies. The first movie ever remember seeing in theaters was my dad took me to see Empire Strikes Back, and before that, we went to see the original Star Wars because they re-released it. It was, I think, the first one came out in 1977. I would have been 3 years old, but I remember seeing it in theaters when it was re-released, and then going to see Empire. Uh, and throughout the decade of the 80s, I saw a lot of cool movies in theaters. Excuse me. Still not Corona. Just got a frog in my throat. Anyway, the 80s are known for really two things. One, the decade of VCR. So now we have, for the first time ever, regular Americans can own copies of their favorite movies. And I remember distinctly when the Hudak family got their first VCR and how cool it was to own copies of your own movies. Because it used to be, anything about that, if a movie came out, you didn't see it again ever unless they put it on TV or they re released it to theaters. And now you can buy your own copy of a movie. It wasn't like today, though. Today, a lot of movies come out, within a couple of months or sometimes weeks on the heels of when it was released into theaters. Uh, and even more now, sometimes they release movies right onto streaming um, as they're in theaters, which is really weird. But back then, it took about a year for a movie, once it hit the theaters, to come out on VHS. At the beginning of this, we had two main models of VCRs. There was a Betamax, which had a much smaller cassette, and then VHS, which is what most people own. And at the beginning, like any other new technology, VCRs were really, really expensive. And now, if you even have one, they practically give them away. But again, this is a big deal because now you can own your own movies. And for Hollywood, you made a ton of money at the box office, but you can make even more money in the sale of VCR tapes. So, and then of course we get rental companies, and that became a big thing. It's kind of funny talking about that now because those things don't even exist. Like, are there even any rental stores in BG anymore? I don't know. Everything's online now, or digital, or on one of the streaming networks. The other thing the 80s are known for is the decade of the sequel. Before the 1980s, you didn't see many sequels, and now it became the norm. And of course, now you guys have grown up. If a movie's good and it does well in the box office and they don't kill the main character, you'll see them again in 2 years in theaters when they bring back the sequel. And typically, sequels are about half as good as the original. There are a few exceptions, and if we were in class, there'd be a nice debate about this. For my money, Empire Strikes Back is by far better than the original Star Wars. I think the second and third Lord of the Rings films are better than the original. Godfather Part Two is at least as good, if not better, than Part One. So there are a few sequels that are as good. Dark Knight um, is or the one with the Joker in it with Heath Ledger is better than the original Dark Knight. So there's a few that are like that, but usually sequels aren't. You think of Raiders of the Lost Ark, which is a classic, and Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom is terrible, mostly because Spielberg cast his wife in that. It was brutal. So anyway, there you go. There's the 80s. And in the 90s were the decade of special effects. So I really can't impress this upon you guys enough because you've grown up in the era of post Avatar, Hollywood, where you can make anything look like you want on screen and it looks realistic. But Jurassic Park was really the first movie to really use special effects to the point where it was almost like, too real. And I remember being just blown away. I was in college when Jurassic Park, the first Jurassic Park, came out, and being completely blown away by the special effects. And those dinosaurs look real to me. And now, with Avatar and the technology that James Cameron created for that film, you can do anything in film and make it look real, and that includes, casting actors that are dead, or making, actors look young, and it's insane what they can do now. Also, during the 90s, we had these major studios create independent production companies so they could make smaller films. So, typically, if a movie was to be made, they had to pretty much guarantee that it would make them millions of dollars, that they would make money off of it in the box office. And even though nothing's a guarantee, you wanted something that was almost a sure thing. And they didn't take chances on little movies. Well, with the creation of independent production companies and smaller studios, not every movie has to be a blockbuster. Not every movie has to be the Avengers. You could make smaller movies like Pulp Fiction or Little Miss Sunshine, or movies like that normally, before the 90s, wouldn't have been shot. So it's pretty cool. We also have the internet, and there's been both a blessing and a curse for the film industry. I guess you'd call it a blurse. On the one hand, you can market movies in ways you never could, and also now sell your movies digitally. On the other hand, it makes it so much easier to pirate them and steal movies. So it's been good and bad. Digital cinema now, almost all film is now shot using digital technology instead of actual film. It gives it a crisper image. Some directors don't like it. You get directors like Quentin Tarantino who refuse to shoot digitally. They still like the old way to do it. The one big pro on this is that it used to be, if you shot a scene or you had a day's of production, you had to send that film out to be produced and and um, developed, and that took a while then for the director then to watch the dailies to see what had been shot and if they needed to reshoot. Well, now with digital cinema, you can see it almost instantly, or you can see it instantly. And not only that, but you could be shooting in multiple locations, and you can just send the digital, the film footage to the directors and the other, assistant directors, and they can compare notes, and it just makes shooting films much more simple. And then we have DVDs, which are so much better than VCRs because you don't have to rewind the darn things. But even these, I can't remember the last time I watched a DVD, and we own hundreds of them, because now with Netflix and on demand, all these on demand things, like, what's the point? We haven't used our DVD player in probably a couple years, so things have obviously changed quite a bit. In the 2000s, some things that happened. Documentary films became somewhat commercially viable. Nobody I like a good documentary as long as you go in knowing that it is going to probably be biased and want to make you feel things in a certain way. But nobody would go to a theater to watch them. Well, that changed in the 2000s. You had movies like Michael Moore's Bowling for Columbine and Roger and Me and Fahrenheit 9/11, and Morgan Spurlock's Super Size Me, and documentary films became commercially acceptable. And now on Netflix, with Netflix, you see them all over the place. I mean, God, how many we've all seen Tiger King, I'm sure, at this point, or Making a Murderer. So documentaries have become much more mainstream. During the 2000s, we also had a revival of what's called epic cinema. So epic cinema are movies with huge sets and huge casts, and are usually very long. So, like, Gone with the Wind would be an epic cinema, or Ben Hur, or The Ten Commandments. And in the 2000s, we had movies like Gladiator or the Lord of the Rings films that were epic. They had giant casts and were very long running films, and big sets. And so that was pretty cool. We also have a revival of musicals. So you get Across the Universe and Moulin Rouge and Chicago, and things like that. Mamma Mia, some musicals became a thing again. IMAX, which I've never seen a full length feature film in IMAX. IMAX bothers my eyes because if you've never been in it's in a rounded room, almost like it's an igloo, and the screen wraps around you, and the sound and the cinema of the IMAX film is much crisper, and it's a lot more immersive, and it's a really cool way to to watch movies unless it makes you want to puke, like it does for me. So I think the closest one to us is in Columbus. Globalization, Hollywood went global, and also foreign films became more mainstream, at least on in terms of what you could get your hands on at a rental store, or now, of course, with streaming services, you can get your hands on pretty much anything. But every time a big Hollywood movie opens, they would do a red carpet screening in Hollywood. Well, then they do the same thing in Tokyo, Japan, or in London, England, or in Paris, France, and the stars would be sent all over the world to like push this movie. And if you talk to people from foreign countries, and I always ask kids in class that are foreign exchange students this question, they'll tell you they can every American blockbuster film that comes out here is it comes out all over the globe. You can see the Avengers or the Star Wars movies anywhere on the planet Earth pretty much when they come out here in the United States. And then 3D came back with a vengeance in the 2000s, and it's gone away. Don't worry. By the time you guys are having kids, it'll come back again. So you guys will be forced to pay an extra $7 for 3D glasses that you'll end up throwing away at the end of the movie. I never give mine back or put them into the recycling bin like they want you to. That's just stealing. That's how they get you. So I refuse to bow down to the man when it comes to that. I always keep my 3D glasses and then I throw them away at home. But by God, no one is going to use my recycled 3D glasses. That's not how Mr. Hudak rolls. All right, so that's it for Hollywood through the decades. Tomorrow, I'm going to talk to you a little bit, real short, about movie soundtracks, and I'm going to have there'll be a worksheet that goes along with that. And then we'll jump in on Wednesday and Thursday. We'll start talking about genres, and then the last thing you'll do for me is you'll have a paper on film genres, discussing what your favorite genre is and why, and some of your favorite movies and things like that. So that's it for today. Peace and love, you guys, and I will see you guys tomorrow for a brief discussion on movie soundtracks and movie scores.